In the 2077 episode City, neon lights pierced the never-ending night like bloody wounds. Zong Han curled up in the corner of the old apartment, the cheap holographic projector on the top flashed the continuous advertisement, and the air was filled with the strange smell of synthetic protein meals. He looked down at the data strap on his wrist, and the screen showed a string of red warnings. The brain connection is abnormal, so it is recommended to turn off immediately. Exceptionally fart, Zong Han muttered, gritting his teeth, and wiped a cold sweat from a large area. This broken thing should have been reported long ago. It's not that he didn't want to break it off, but this experience of brain connection was his final bet. As a baseline programmer, Zong Han has long been overwhelmed by the company's data contract. If he doesn't find any money-worthy loopholes or black market information, he will not be able to pay the rent for the next month. Not to mention, he also owed a lot of debts to the guys who had loaned the black market. Tonight's experience was the unofficial brain plug-in he visited on the dark network, saying that he could overcome the company's restrictions and directly access deep-level data layers. Zong Han didn't expect to dig out any gold mines, he just wanted to sell fish and fish to the underground market. Unexpectedly, as soon as I got stuck in the brain, it seemed like a server that had been blocked into it, buzzing, as if someone was knocking his brain with a knife. Damn, I can't hold it back. Zong Han hugged his head with both hands, his eyes turned dark, and his whole person seemed to be sucked into a bottomless digital vortex. When his consciousness woke up again, Zong Han found himself standing in a completely unfamiliar place. This is not the reality, nor is it the virtual interface of the brain he is familiar with, but a cold and dark space with countless faint light floating around, like a starry sky, but each light is shaking slightly, emitting a deep sorrow. Where is this? Zong Han said in a low voice, and his voice replied in this space, but no one answered. He tried to take a step, and there was no physical ground under his feet, and the whole person seemed to be floating in the air. Suddenly, a light approached slowly and gradually condensed into a vague human form. The human figure had no face, and the sound directly dripped into Zong Han's brain, carrying endless hope. Save me, they are drawing my data. Zong Han was shocked and retreated suddenly, but found that he could not escape from this space at all. Who are you? Where's this? He asked loudly, trying to cover up the panic in his heart. This is dead. The sound of the sound continued, as if it would dissipate at any time. The tomb of the digital soul, the enterprise, traps us, the place. Slaying the earth? Digital soul? Zong Han's brain was in a mess. He heard news from the black market, saying that some people's brains are too connected, and the soul data will be secretly extracted by companies, turning into so-called digital slaves. But he always thought that this was just an urban saying, but he didn't expect to be true. Before he could figure out his thoughts, Jilai's head pain suddenly came, as if something was tearing his mind. Zong Han shouted, knelt down in the air, pressing the sun's hole with both hands. Don't die, what is this ghost thing? The humanoid light seemed to sense his pain, and his voice became even more anxious. You can hear me, you are different, help me, I can tell you the truth. Help you? I'm almost hanging myself. Zong Han gritted his teeth and reluctantly slapped. But he knew that this place was never simple. If you can really find the secrets of the company, you may be able to turn it over. He reluctantly calmed his mind and gasped, asking, what is the truth you said? Enterprise, they are collecting soul data, to build weapons. My data, is locked in a section. If you can crack, I can tell you more. Zong Han's eyes twitched. Arms? This is no small matter. If he can really get the certificate, he will not only sell a good price, but may even make those high-ranking corporate bastards suffer a little. But the pain became more and more intense, his vision became blurry, and his mind seemed to be torn apart. Tell me, where is the day? Zong Han gritted his teeth and reluctantly spit out a few words. The light shook for a moment, and then a cold stream of data poured into his brain. It was a string of coordinates pointing to a small data point deep in the ground. Zong Han had not yet had time to digest this information, and the pain reached the top. The whole world was dizzy and he fell into darkness again. When Zong Han opened his eyes again, he had returned to reality, lying on the cold floor of the apartment. The warning light on the data wrist is like a warning for the rescue vehicle, and the brain connection has automatically opened. He gasped, touched the back of his brain, and found that the connecting socket at the back was burning as if it had just been taken out of the fire. This broken plug-in is so fatal. Zong Han got up in a hurry, his brain full of sight that he had just seen. The day point mentioned in the light is also the secret weapon of the Enterprise. This information is like a thorn, which makes him feel stung. But he didn't have time to think about it. A harsh police report suddenly ejaculated on the street outside the apartment. Through the window, Zong Han saw several unmanned machines scanning the broken street. He was nervous that these unmanned machines were not good things, Enterprise monitoring machines, specially used to capture anomalous data users. Damn, has the experiment been discovered? Zong Han quickly grabbed the end of the table, stuffed his old backpack, and pulled out of the apartment without looking back. He knew that once he was targeted by the company, there were only two ways to wait for him, to be arrested and to be cleared. The bottom streets of the esports city are like huge garbage dumps, with the smell of metal and chemical drugs flying in the air. Zong Han lowered his head, shuttled between the crowd and the broken trunk, trying to get rid of the uninhabited machine behind him. But his head pain was not relieved, and every step he took was like a knife in his brain. No. I have to find a place to hide. Zong Han gritted his teeth, and suddenly a location in his brain, the underground data trading market. Although the place is dangerous, at least the company's hands are not that deep, and he may be able to find someone to help deal with the side effects of the brain. Half an hour later, Zong Han came to a hidden alley, which was as close as an old iron door. He knocked 3 times, stopped, and knocked 2 more times, which was the hidden number of the market. The iron door opened with a squeak, and a squid full of facial tattoos poked out and looked him up and down. New face? Are you here? The sound of Zong Han was low, as if he was pulled out of his throat. Look for information and sell data. Zong Han softly said in a low voice and put on a look like a veteran, I have a stock, it's worth it. Qian Han hummed and let him in from his side. As soon as Zong Han stepped into the market, he was in a mess. The trunk was filled with various illegally modified brain parts. Hackers clamored for trading data in the corners, and the pungent smell of synthetic drugs was scattered in the air. He just walked a few steps when a woman in a tight leather jacket suddenly stopped him. She wore a pair of enhancing eyeglasses, an unknown smile swept across the corner of her mouth, and her voice was crisp and she brought a few points. Oh, new, it doesn't look very good. Side effects of brain? Or was it chased by a company? Zong Han felt tight and his face was calm. Who are you? How can you control it? The woman raised her eyebrows and smiled even more furiously. My name is Zong Han, the information broker here. You have to be stripped on the first day of your arrival. But, I think you are still interested. Do you want me to cover it up? Of course, it must be a little better. Zong Han narrowed his eyes and looked at her up and down. This woman is not a simple character at first glance, but now he really needs help. The headache is getting worse and worse, and the uninhabited company may come to you at any time, so he doesn't have many choices. Okay, help me avoid this wave, you can open the conditions. Zong Han said, gritting his teeth. Zong Han grinned and patted his shoulder. Good. Come with me and find a place to take a breath. Slowly say that the trouble in your brain is not sure I can help you. In a secret space deep in the market, Zong Han could finally sit down and take a breath. Zong Han gave him a bottle of electrolytic beverages, leaning against the wall, crossing his legs, and casually playing with the data card in his hand. Say, what's going on with your brain? It seems like you're going to hang up any time. Zong Han asked directly. Zong Han hesitated for a moment, but finally chose to confess, at least partly confessed. He didn't mention anything, just said that he tried an unofficial plug-in, but the connection was abnormal, which attracted the company's attention. After hearing this, Zong Han blew a whistle. You are so cute. You dare to touch unofficial plugins. However, the tracking of enterprises is not something you can do. You have to deal with the side effects of your brain first, otherwise you will collapse before they catch you. Is there any way? Zong Han asked urgently. It's true, it's worth spending money. Xiao Han praised his voice, reported a number, and heard that Zong Han's face was green. So expensive? I can't even lose myself if I sell it. He couldn't help but complain. Then think of a way. Xiao Han put his hands on his hands and said nothing about his words. However, I think there should be something special in your brain, otherwise the company would not be so fast to target you. Do you want to cooperate? Help me with some data, and I will help you solve the side effects. What about it? Zong Han was silent. He knew that this woman was definitely not simple, but now he really needed allies. Don't worry, Xiaokai Bird, I can't let you die. Xiao Han stood up with a smile. Stay a break first, I'll take you to see someone after that and help you stabilize your brain. With a smooth flow, you'd better think about what you have to sell, otherwise this market is not a charity organization. After a few hours, Zong Han's head pain was relieved a little, and his brain became much more awake. He sat in the corner of the space, staring at the end of the data on his wrist, and the coordinates that light from the dead land appeared in his brain. The secret weapon of the Enterprise. If it can really crack that stage, I might get some big information. Zong Han said in a low voice, and a huge amount of hope ignited in his heart. He took a deep breath and restarted the brain-machine connection. This time, he carefully lowered the data flow and tried to avoid re-induced side effects. The consciousness sank into the ground again, and the cold air was creepy, but Zong Han clenched his teeth and quickly locked a small data point according to the coordinates. The day looked like a floating black cube, surrounded by countless red chains. Zong Han focused his energy and tried to invade it with his brain power. The side effects came again, and the pain was like a thorn, but he gritted his teeth and sucked hard. Finally, after a few minutes, he heard a crisp click, the chains opened, the cube opened slowly, and a stream of data flowed into his mind. Success. Zong Han gasped and felt abrupt. At that moment, he felt an unprecedented shock. He could actually crack the data points of the company. This ability is simple like a key to a secret world. In the data stream, a faint sound came up, and it was the previous light. Thank you. I'm free. Remember, the core data library of the Enterprise, in the central tower, their weapon plan, the agent soul melt. Be careful, they will chase you. Zong Han's heart was shocked, his soul was melting. This name makes people feel cold and upset when they hear it. But he didn't have time to think about it, and the side effects broke out again, and his mind seemed to be pulled back to reality. He suddenly opened his eyes and realized that he was sweating heavily and was about to fall off his chair. Don't die. This ability is indeed great, but if you use it a few more times, I'm afraid I'll really be thrown away. Zong Han smiled bitterly and wiped his face, unable to hide the excitement in his eyes. He knew that this was just the beginning. The secret of the Enterprise, the soul melting, and more digital souls are waiting for him to liberate. Outside the door, Xiao Han's voice suddenly sounded, "Small bird, are you ready? There is something to fuck." Zong Han took a deep breath and stood up. He knew that the road ahead would only be more dangerous, but he had no choice but to go back. Number of words, about 3,800 words. Zong Han opened the broken iron door in the interval, and what came towards him was the familiar chaos in the underground market. The pungent smell of synthetic drugs is mixed with the sound of metal friction, and the surrounding calls and sales and private language exchanges between hackers. Low-sounding transactions are noisy. Xiao Han walked in front, her tight leather jacket outlined her neat figure, enhancing the actual lens occasionally flashed through a stream of light, which looked both mysterious and dangerous. Follow the tight spot, the little bird, Xiao Han said without replying, with a few teasings in his language. This place is not a place of sight, and I'm not responsible for losing my life. Zong Han hummed, without saying a word, and his brain was still digesting the information he had just heard in the ground. Spirit melting, the core database of the Enterprise, the central tower. These keywords are like blocks of pieces, creating a dangerous picture in his brain. He knew he had rolled into a game far beyond his ability, but now he would only die faster. Where are we going? Zong Han finally couldn't help but open his mouth, his voice being low so as not to be heard by the trunk beside him. Xiao Han walked a step, over the head, and a meaningful smile was hanging on the corner of his mouth. Look for an old friend. He has something in his hand that can help you stabilize the side effects of the brain. For easy delivery, I have to dig some information about the company's recent actions. Don't you also want to know why they are eyeing you so quickly? Zong Han clicked the head and didn't ask any more questions. He knew that people like Xiao Han would never help in vain, and there must be his own calculation behind them. But for now, he really needs her resources and human resources. The side effects of the brain are like a regular blow-up, which may cause him to collapse at any time, not to mention that the company's tracking of the unmanned machine may have locked his approximate position. The two walked through a narrow passage at the deepest part of the market and came to a secret renovated workshop. The workshop was filled with all kinds of old game parts, the welding machine at the corners of the wall was still sparking, and a middle-aged man with oily face was slapped with his head down and a brain machine chip was slamming. Seeing Xiao Han coming in, he raised his head, showed his yellow teeth, and smiled. Yi, Xiao Han, has he brought a new face? This kid looks half dead, not a nuisance, right? Small talk, old man. Xiao Han sat on the torn chair beside him, crossing his legs. This is Zong Han. There's a little brain problem, so let's take a look. Also, I want the latest corporate information in your hand. Don't tell me you don't have any goods. The old man curled his lips, put down the chip in his hand, and waved to Zong Han. Come on, let me see your brain-breaking machine. Is the side effect not small? It looks like you're just crawling out of the ground. Zong Han's heart thumped, and he was so strong that he was calm on the surface, so he walked to Lao Zi to sit down. Lao Zi took out a casual scanner from the drawer and scanned the connecting socket on Zong Han's back, and a bunch of red warning data popped up on the screen. There is an unofficial plug-in, and it has been loading and running, and it has also been connected to the deep-level data layer. The old iron slammed, his language was full of mockery. You kid are really not afraid of death. The core of the brain has begun to collapse. If you don't deal with it, your consciousness data will be swallowed up long ago. Is there any way to practice? Zong Han gritted his teeth and asked, with a hint of anxiety in his voice. It can be repaired, but you have to change a high-level stabilizer and rewrite some firewall codes. Lao Xing slapped his hair and reported a day's price. But, this price, you know. Zong Han's face froze and he wanted to open his mouth. Xiao Han slapped the table first. Okay, I'll talk about the price, so I'll help him stabilize his brain first. This kid is useful, don't let him die too quickly. The old iron snatched his shoulders and said nothing more, turning around and turning out a small stabilizer from a bunch of parts and starting to connect to Zong Han's brain socket. When the cold metal touched the skin, Zong Han couldn't help but tremble, but then a clear stream of data was injected slowly, and the pain in his head was indeed much lighter. Thank you. Zong Han said in a low voice, his eyes turning to Xiao Han. What is the corporate information you just said? Xiao Han glanced at him, clicked an electronic smoke, and spit out a mouthful of blue smoke. Don't worry, barbecue bird, wait until the iron takes out the goods before talking. But I would like to remind you first that the company's recent actions are not simple, and I heard that they have built a new database in the edge area to store a certain special data. I doubt that it is not related to your brain. Zong Han's heart skipped a beat, and the spirit-melting furnace that was said to be in the dead light appeared in his brain. He was about to ask something more when a low mechanical sound suddenly came outside the workshop, like the silence of heavy equipment crushing over the ground. The old iron's face changed and quickly turned off the equipment in his hand, and said in a low voice, Damn, corporate thugs. How did they find this? Xiao Han's eyes flashed, and he suddenly stood up, and Zhao Zong Han winked, small bird, ready to run away. It seems that you are more numb than I thought. Without Zong Han's reaction, the iron door of the workshop was kicked open by a huge force, and the fragments were filled with pieces. A tall man walked in, covered with blacky sports armor. His right arm was directly modified into a microparticle cannon, and his eyes were filled with cold red light. He glanced around and finally his eyes were locked on Zong Han. His voice was low and mechanical. Purpose confirmation, Zong Han, an illegal invader, arrest immediately. How you? Xiao Han gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, the top thugs in the Enterprise are specializing in cleaning up garbled like us. Zong Han's heartbeat was accelerating, and there was only one thought in his brain, run. He suddenly rushed towards the pile of parts beside him and tried to find a cover, but Hao Yu's reaction was faster. The particle cannon was instantly charged, and a blue energy beam rushed over directly, shattering half of the wall. Damn! Zong Han rushed to the side, reluctantly avoiding the aftermath, and his heart almost jumped out of his throat. Xiao Han quickly turned over and hid behind a metal table, took out a small electromagnet gun, and shot several guns at Hao Yu, but Zifu hit the armor without leaving any traces. It's useless, Xiao Han, Hao Yu sneered, approaching, you guys will never understand the power of the Enterprise. I can give you a few more days of life with that kid. Be a dream. Xiao Han gritted his teeth and shouted to Zong Han, don't be stunned, find a way. I'll cover you up. Zong Han was panting and his brain moved quickly. He knew that he could not escape the monster Hao Yu by relying on his body, and his only hope was his brain ability. He bit his teeth tightly and quickly activated the connection, and his mind sinks to the ground again. The cold air enveloped him again, and the light floating around him still blew a deep sorrow. Zong Han focused his energy and tried to perceive the real Hao Yu. Sure enough, on the edge of the ground, he discovered an unusual data point, emitting strong energy waves. That was Hao Yu's game-in-chief weapon. Finished. Zong Han gritted his teeth, urged his own consciousness, and tried to invade the spot. But the side effects exploded almost instantly, and the pain in the head was like a knife cutting, and the vision began to blur. He knew that this connection was more dangerous than any previous one, but if it was not successful, he and Xiao Han would have to die. Let me, open! Zong Han growled, his mind turned into a stream of data, and forced himself to the point of the day. Hao Yu's particle gun system seemed to be stuck with something, and its charging suddenly became interrupted, making a harsh sound of failure. In fact, Hao Yu stopped suddenly, with a flash of red light in his eyes, obviously not expecting that his weapon would lose its spirit. He growled, turned up his mechanical fist and smashed it to the place where Zong Han was hiding. Run quickly! Xiao Han seized the opportunity, rushed out from behind the cover, pulled Zong Han and ran to the back door of the workshop. Hao Yu's fist hit the sky, and a pit was directly smashed on the ground, but his weapon system was still in the process of restart and could not catch up immediately. The two stumbled and rushed out of the workshop and entered the mystery behind the market. Zong Han was vague in his mind, and the side effects made him almost unstable. He relied on Xiao Han to drag and pull to keep up. The pain in his ears was like someone was diamonding his brain, but he knew that stopping now would be a dead end. After running for more than 10 minutes, Xiao Han stopped and pressed Zong Han against a broken wall, leaning against the wall and gasping himself. She wiped the sweat from the top and stared at Zong Han, with a little anger in her language. What have you done just now? Why did Hao Yu's weapon suddenly lose its spirit? Zong Han gasped and reluctantly slapped. I interfered with his system, brain ability, can invade data points. Xiao Han's eyes changed and he looked up and down, as if he had known this person for the first time. What are you talking about? Invasion data points? This ability is not something that ordinary programmers can do. What secrets do you hide? Zong Han didn't have the energy to explain, so he snatched his head, but just said in a low voice, first, find a safe place, I can't hold back. Xiao Han hummed, and stopped asking, and helped him continue walking forward. After a few minutes, the two people came to a deserted underground warehouse, and there were only a few old warehouses. Xiao Han put Zong Han down, took out a bottle of urgent electrolytic agent from his pocket, and forced it into his mouth. Drinking it can relieve some side effects. Xiao Han said coldly, then sat next to him, ordered an electronic smoke, and was silent for a moment. After taking the medicine, Zong Han felt a little more awake and his head pain became a little lighter. He leaned against the container and panted, Hao Yu, why did he find us? How quickly did the company track down? Zong Han spitted out a mouthful of smoke. His eyes were sunken. It's not about following us, but someone sold us. There must be an insider on the iron, otherwise how you wouldn't have found the workshop so accurately. However, this is not the point. The point is that companies have listed you as a high-risk target, and they will not let you go. Zong Han's heart sank and gritted his teeth and asked, "What about you? Why are you helping me? Don't tell me what kind person you are." Zong Han smiled, with some bitterness in his smile. "Good people? There is no such creature here. I help you because we have a common enemy. Enterprises. They are not just suppressing data slaves, nor are they just doing it for money. They are using soul data to create an ultimate weapon, the name of the soul-melting burner. If this is done, the entire Singapore city will become their experience." Zong Han's pupils shrank, and the words that the light said in the dead appeared in his brain. He asked in a low voice, "Soul Furious Fur, how do you know this?" Zong Han was silent for a while, and a complex look flashed in his eyes. "Because I have someone killed by them." The soul data was extracted and turned into a test piece of the weapon. I looked at it for 2 years before I could find this thread. But I am alone. I can't fight against the Enterprise, so I need you, a person who can directly invade the data node. Zong Han was stunned. He didn't expect that there was such a past behind such a woman like Zong Han. He looked down at the end of the data on his wrist, and his brain was filled with mixed feelings. Finally, he pointed, "Okay, I'll help you. But I have a condition. If it can really destroy the melting of the soul, I want to make sure I can survive." Zong Han grinned and stretched out his hand. "Trade. Small bird, from now on, we are allies." Zong Han hesitated for a moment, stretched out his hand, and the two of them held it hard. At that moment, he suddenly felt that there was at least one person in this dangerous game that could be trusted. "What should I do next?" Zong Han asked. Zong Han stood up with a calm look on his face. "The Enterprise has a small database in the edge of the area, saying that it has stored the preliminary data of the Spirit Furious burner. We have to go in and get the certificate to figure out their next plan. However, this job is not simple, and how you will definitely come and find out the trouble. You have to prepare yourself." Zong Han smiled bitterly and touched the connector on the back. "Preparation? I'm almost gone. What else can I prepare?" Zong Han patted his shoulder and a few encouragements in his language. "Don't be discouraged, Shao Kai Bird. You can only take advantage of how you use weapon ability, which is not something that ordinary people can do. As long as you can make progress a little more, you may really surprise the company." Zong Han didn't say anything, but a hard struggle ignited. He knew that brain ability was his only trump card. Although the side effects almost killed him, the moment he successfully interfered with how you made him feel an unprecedented sense of power. If he can further master this ability, maybe he can really change something. "We'll move after a few hours." After Zong Han said, he closed his eyes against the container, as if he was mulling some plans. Zong Han also closed his eyes and tried to figure out the fatigue caused by side effects of brain-relieving machines. But in a sea of brain, the cold sky and the sorrowing lights cannot be removed. He knew that the next road would only be more difficult, but he had no choice. After a few hours, the night became deeper, and the neon lights of the city of Jabwa were flashing far away, as if calling them into the more dangerous purity. Zong Han and Zong Han packed up their equipment and prepared the database that dived into the edge area. How use threat, the company's traits, and the secret of the soul melting, everything is like a huge net, waiting for them to tear apart. Terms, about 3,750 words. The edge of the city of Xianbo is like a forgotten ruin. The broken buildings look even more slight under the reflection of neon lights, and the air is filled with the smell of chemical waste materials and metal stews. Zong Han and Zong Han squatted behind a scrapped warehouse, strengthening real-life eye lenses to see the Enterprise database that cannot be far away. It was a low black building with high-strength alloys on the outer wall, surrounded by unmanned patrols and hidden sensors, and there were several fully armed guards at the door, holding an electromagnetic step gun in his hand. His eyes were cold and alert. "This place is as guarded as an iron bucket," Zong Han murmured in a low voice, wiping out a cold sweat. Are you sure we can go in? It's good not to be beaten into a squid. Zong Han curled his lips and adjusted the micro-interference on his wrist. His language was light and calm and serious. Small birds, don't worry. These guards and unmanned machines are just superficial skills, and the real trouble is inside a digital defense system. Their databases are connected to the main websites of the company. Firewalls are not comparable to those street goods you have used. You have to rely on your brain's capabilities to handle this part, and I am responsible for the real cover. Zong Han clicked the head, and the connection socket on the back was intimately ignited, reminding him that the side effects of his brain were still on the verge of being ready. He took a deep breath, suppressed his inner anxiety, and asked in a low voice, "What is the plan?" Zong Han took out a small black device from his backpack, which looked like a mini grenade. This is an electromagnetic bullet that can damage the unmanned and sensor in a short time, but it only has a 30-second window. We have to take this time to rush to the side door and avoid the front guard. After entering, I will use the magic ID bought from the black market to cover us up. You are dedicated to cracking the digital lock. Remember, don't force it, the side effects are deadly. Zong Han smiled bitterly and said, "Come on the way? I'm free to stand all the time, so how dare I come on the way?" Zong Han patted his shoulder, and a hint of encouragement came from his eyes. "Don't underestimate yourself, Shaokai Bird. You can interfere with how you use weapon system to show that your brain has potential. If you hold on to this wave, we can get the data of the soul melting furnace and give it to the company." Zong Han pointed his head, held the end of his hand tightly, and a heart of struggle ignited. He knew that this battle was not only about his own life, but also about countless souls who were squeezed into slaves by the company. If it can really reveal the truth about the melting of the soul, maybe he can do something for this rotten city. "Are you ready?" Zong Han asked in a low voice, pressing his finger on the start button of the electromagnetic bullet. "Come on." Zong Han gritted his teeth and responded. The next second, Zong Han pressed the button suddenly, and an invisible electromagnetic wave exploded from the device. The inhuman around him instantly lost control, and it was circulating in the air like drunkenness, and the indicator lights of the sensor also collectively turned off. The guard at the door was stunned for a moment, and without any reaction, Zong Han had already pulled Zong Han out of the warehouse, and the two quickly rolled to the side of the warehouse like shadows. "Hurry!" Zong Han shouted softly, took out a fake ID card from his pocket, and swiped into the card reader on the side. The door lock sounded a light and slipped open, but at the same time, Zong Han's data wrist suddenly lit up red, showing an emergency warning. A high-level digital protection system was detected, and it is recommended to disconnect the connection. Damn it, really? Zong Han gritted his teeth and quickly started the brain-machine connection, his mind sinking into a cold data layer. There is no longer a real ruin in front of us, but an endless stream of intersecting data and dense firewall codes, like a huge mystical palace, trying to trap any invaders in it. "Zong Han, don't be stupid, get the door lock." Zong Han's voice came from reality, with some urgency. Zong Han focused his energy and tried to find the door control point, but the firewall's counterattack arrived almost instantly, and a sharp wave of data pierced his mind, as if someone was directly stimulating his brain with current. He hummed a little and almost fell out of the connection, but gritted his teeth and finally found a hidden weakness: an encryption algorithm that had passed away. "Finished," Zong Han said in a low voice. His fingers flew quickly in the air, and his mind turned into a data flow, traversing the main firewall and directly invading the door lock system. After a few seconds, a click sounded on the actual side, which opened completely. "Fuck beautifully," Zong Han said in a low voice, and pulled Zong Han to quickly slip into the building. The corridor was dim and cold, and the walls were covered with monitoring lenses, but the interferer in Zong Han's hand was still in effect, and the lenses were temporarily in a state of loss. The two of them moved forward quickly along the corridor, aiming to be the data core room deep in the building. However, Zong Han's head pain became more and more intense, and the side effects were like an invisible hand trying to tear his mind apart. He bit his teeth tightly and kept up with Zong Han's pace, but every step seemed to be walking on the tip of a knife. "If you can't help but say a word, don't force yourself. Xiao Han glanced at him, with a little concern in his language. It's okay. I'll go to the core room first. Zong Han gasped and strengthened the decoration. After a few minutes, the two came to the core room. The defense here is obviously more tight, and there is also a biological scanner next to the door, which obviously cannot be solved by creating an ID. Zong Han knew that he could only rely on himself this time. Leave it to me, he said softly, his consciousness sinking into the data layer again. This time the firewall is 10 times more complicated than the door lock, and the digital trap layer is unscathed. Each layer of code is like a net, trying to capture his conscious data. Zong Han carefully dripped through one trap after another, and his head pain became more and more intense, and his vision became blurry, as if he would collapse at any time. Hurry, the effect of the dryer is almost over. Xiao Han's voice came from reality, with a hint of anxiety. Zong Han gritted his teeth and his mind was almost torn apart by side effects, but he suddenly discovered a hidden loophole. The update log of the firewall showed that the system had a short crash 3 days ago, leaving behind an unrepaired back door. He seized this opportunity, concentrated all his energy, turned into a stream of data, and rushed into the back door. It's done! Zong Han growled, and the door of the core room released a crisp sound, sliding open. But at the same time, a sharp warning sound suddenly erupted in the building, and red warning lights flashed in the corridor, clearly showing that his invasion and touch had developed a higher level of defense mechanism. Damn, I've been discovered. Xiao Han said softly, quickly took out his electromagnetic gun, leaned against the door to watch. Get in and download the data, I'll keep it. Zong Han stumbled into the core room, with rows of cold servers inside, and an uncountable stream of data was displayed on the screen of the central console. He quickly connected to the console, his mind sinks into the ground again, and tried to directly access the data of the soul-melting burner. The cold air on the ground still makes people creepy, and the light floating around them produces a deep sorrow. Zong Han found a huge data point, emitting ominous energy waves, which was obviously the relevant data of the soul-melting furnace. But when he tried to invade the picture, an unprecedented wave of counterattack came, like an innumerable spike that pierced his mind directly. Ah! Zong Han screamed in reality, holding his head with both hands, almost fallen off the chair. When the side effects reached the top, his vision was blurred, and his mind seemed to be torn apart. Zong Han! Stop! Xiao Han's voice came from the door, and the sound of an electromagnet gun was also ejaculated. Obviously, the company's defense has come to an end, and she is trying hard to cover it up. Zong Han bit his teeth tightly, and blood flowed down his nostrils, but he knew that if he gave up now, all efforts would be in vain. He exercised his concentration and rushed to that data point again. This time, he no longer forced himself, but changed his strategy and disguised his consciousness data into part of the system, and penetrated it smoothly. Let me open! Zong Han growled, and his mind finally broke through the defense, and no data flowed into his brain. He saw the truth about the Soul Furious. The Enterprise is transforming digital soul data into a destructive AI control system. Once completed, this AI will be able to control the entire brain network of the sports city and turn all humans into real data slaves. This group of crazy people. Zong Han gritted his teeth and quickly started the download program to transmit the key data to his end. But at the same time, the actual warning sound was even more harsh. The sound of heavy equipment was heard in the corridor, and a cold sound came out. Zong Han, an illegal invader, surrender immediately, otherwise you will be killed. It's how you. Xiao Han gritted his teeth and whispered, quickly released a smoke fog, trying to block the other party's video. Small pig bird, download it quickly, I won't be able to hold it for long. Zong Han was in pain and his mind was tearing back and forth between the ground and the reality, but he clenched his teeth and forced himself to complete the final data transmission. Finally, the prompt download completion was displayed on the end screen. He suddenly opened the brain and the whole person fell on the chair, gasping for a long time, as if he had just left the ghost door. It's done! Zong Han said in a low voice, his voice so weak that he could hardly hear it. Let's go! Xiao Han rushed in, pulled him up, and the two of them stumbled out of the core room. The smoke was spreading in the corridor, and Hao Yu was approaching quickly with a team of corporate thugs. His game armor flashed cold red light in the smoke, and the particle cannon had been charged. "I can't escape, slap." Hao Yu sneered, and the particle cannon emitted a blue energy beam, directly shattering the wall next to it. Zong Han gritted his teeth and quickly took out the last electromagnetic bullet from his backpack and rushed towards Hao Yu. The wave of the rush exploded, and Hao Yu's particle cannon lost its spirit in a short time, but his mechanical fist was still fatal, and he rushed forward in a few steps, hitting Zong Han with one punch. "Be careful." Zong Han instinctively swept over, protected Zong Han with his body, and smashed his fist against his shoulder on the wall, causing him to faint. But Zong Han took advantage of the opportunity to counterattack, and the electromagnet gun opened several times, hitting the connection link of Hao Yu's armor, which narrowly extended his movements. "Leave the door." Zong Han dragged Zong Han and quickly rushed to another corridor. Hao Yu's roar rose behind him, the particle cannon started again, and the energy beams came one after another. The two could only dodge in wolf ways, and they were almost hit several times. Zong Han had a vague idea, and the side effects made him almost unable to think, but he knew that if he fell down now, both of them would die. He gritted his teeth and activated the brain-machine connection again, his mind sinking to the ground, trying to interfere with Hao Yu's weapon system. In the cold air and the ground, he found Hao Yu's data points, but this time the defense was even more intense, and the counterattack almost crushed his mind. Zong Han growled, as he tried his best to move into the stage, successfully interfering with the charging program of the particle cannon. In fact, Hao Yu's weapon lost its spirit again, and he let out an angry roar, but Zong Han and Zong Han had already taken the opportunity to exit the door and disappeared into the ruins of the surrounding area. After a few hours, the two of them hid in a deserted underground car park and sat down on the wall panting. Zong Han was sweating heavily, his face was as white as paper, and his nose bleeding continued to flow. The side effects of the post-mortem made him almost unable to speak. Zong Han is not much better, his body is covered in dust and there is a little color on his shoulders. She took out a bottle of electrolytics from her pocket and forced it into Zong Han's mouth, and complained a few times in her voice, "You kid, you really want to die. That's it. If you hadn't fucked Hao Yu's weapon, we would have been shut." Zong Han reluctantly took the medicine and smiled bitterly, "Don't interfere, we have to stop, we don't have to choose." Zong Han hummed, said nothing, and then picked up Zong Han's tail and checked the data that had just been downloaded. The content displayed on the screen made her face darker and darker. Finally, she whispered, "This group of crazy people. Spiritual melting is not a single weapon, but an AI system that can control all brain networks. They want to turn people from the entire city into puppets." Zong Han gasped and reluctantly slapped out, "Is there a way to crack it?" Zong Han shook his head and his eyes were complicated. The data mentioned that the core control system is in the central tower, which is the headquarters of the enterprise. The defense is 100 times stronger than this database. Our current strength is to go in and die. Zong Han was silent. He knew that the central tower was the most dangerous place in the entire sports city, and Hao Yu was just the tip of the iceberg of the enterprise, and the real threat was still behind. But at the same time, he also felt an unprecedented growth. Just in the dead, he broke through the limit, not only cracked the advanced defense system, but also completed the data download due to the recent collapse. This is an achievement he never imagined. "Stay first." Zong Han stood up and patted the dust on his body. "We have to find a safe place to analyze these data, and then think about how to deal with Hao Yu. That guy won't let us go." Zong Han clicked the head, closed his eyes, and tried to relieve the fatigue caused by side effects. But in the sea of brain, the melting data of the soul and the morning zodiac in the ground could not be removed. He knew that the next battle would only be cooler, but he had no way out. The night was deeper, and the neon lights in the city of Xianbo were flashing far away, as if mocking their insignificance. But Zong Han tightened his fist, and a faint and destiny fire ignited in his heart. No matter what, he would destroy the melting of the soul, for himself and those souls trapped in the ground. Number of words, About 3,800 words. The central tower of the city of Jabua pierced the ever-disappearing haze, like a cold sword, pointing straight to the sky. The tower body is covered with an obsidian-like alloy shell, and no data flows on the surface, emitting pressure and majesty. This is the core of the Enterprise's power and the final defense line of the spirit melting plan. Zong Han and Xiao Han were hiding in a waste repair passage near the bottom of the tower. They were covered with dust and scars left when they escaped from the edge. Their breathing sound was particularly heavy in the narrow space. Zong Han looked down at the end of the wrist, and the screen showed details of the spirit melting furnace downloaded from the Edge database. Every word pierced his heart like a knife. The Enterprise not only had to use Digital Soul Drive AI control system, but also planned to turn all citizens into selfless puppets through the brain network. This is no longer a pressure, but a destruction of human nature itself. This is our last chance, Xiao Han said in a low voice, checking the electromagnetic guns and a few self-made bullets in his hand, with a look of exhaustion. The central tower's defense system is the strongest in the entire city, but the control core of the Spirit Furious is at the top. As long as it is destroyed, the Enterprise's plan will be finished. Zong Han clicked a little, and the back of the brain socket was intimately shaking. The side effects of his hindrance made his hands tremble slightly. He knew that this dive would not only face Hao Yu and the elite thugs in the Enterprise, but also face the digital defense system of the soul-melting Furious in the ground. Although his brain ability has improved a lot, the side effects are getting worse and worse. Every time he connects, it feels like walking in front of a ghost gate. If I can't hold it back. Zong Han opened his voice in a low voice, and his voice was a little sad. Don't worry about me, just blow up the control core. Xiao Han glanced at him and sneered out of the corner of his mouth, stop talking about such stupidity, Xiaokai bird. Do you think I helped you so far to see you die? Let's go in and come out together, do you understand? Zong Han was stunned for a moment, then he smiled hard and said nothing more. He knew that Xiao Han was hard-mouthed, but along the way, she had protected him with her life more than once. Between the two people, it is no longer a pure cooperation in interests, but a kind of trust that cannot be described. Are you ready? Xiao Han stood up, adjusted and strengthened the real eye lens, and pressed his fingers on the slamming activation key. Come on. Zong Han took a deep breath, held his arms tightly and lit up his mind, and a desperate decision ignited in his mind. The process of diving into the central tower was even more shocking than they thought. Xiao Han used the black market to get rid of the bottom-level security system, but the higher the upwards, the more it is, the more tight the defense is. Unmanned patrols, laser-sensitive networks, hidden electromagnetic traps, and corporate thugs that may appear at any time make both of them walk on thin ice every step. Zong Han started the brain connection several times, invading and cracking the digital lock, but each connection made his head hurt, his nose bleeding could not stop flowing, and his mind became more and more blurred. Finally, after paying a few exposed prices, they arrived at the entrance of the control hall at the top of the central tower. The door of the hall is a huge alloy wall, and the biological identification system and digital firewall next to it are emitting cold pressure. Zong Han leaned against the wall, gasping for a long time, his face as white as paper, and the side effects almost made him stand unstable. This is the last line of defense, Xiao Han said in a low voice, checking only the 2 remaining bullets. I can interfere with the monitoring in reality, but digital defense depends entirely on you. Zong Han gritted his teeth and rubbed his nose bleeding, and his voice was low, I must do it. He closed his eyes, and his mind sank into the ground again. The cold empty space still made people feel creepy, and the light floating around us emitted a deep sorrow, as if countless souls were asking for help from him. Zong Han concentrated his energy and quickly locked the digital node that controlled the hall, a huge black sphere, surrounded by countless red data chains, emitting ominous energy waves. This is obviously the core defense system of the spirit melting burner. Come on. Zong Han growled, his mind turned into a data stream, and rushed towards the ball. But as soon as it touched, no number of sharp thorns came towards him, cutting his mind like a blade. The side effects exploded in an instant, and the pain in his head dripped into his brain like a diamond, his vision blurred, and he almost wanted to swallow him. In fact, Xiao Han looked at Zong Han tightly, seeing his body twitching, his face became more and more difficult to see. He couldn't help but whisper, "Damn, Shaokai bird, don't be strong." She quickly took out a small bottle of emergency medicine from her backpack and forced it into Zong Han's mouth to try to relieve his side effects. On the ground, Zong Han gritted his teeth and held himself hard to break. He knew that if he was out of business now, not only would he have to sacrifice his previous efforts, but he would have to spend his entire life. He changed his strategy and no longer forced it, but instead installed the consciousness data into part of the system to penetrate the defense layer. The process was extremely slow, and each step was like dancing on the tip of a knife, but in the end, he found a hidden loophole, the update log of the defense system, which revealed that a recent maintenance left behind an unrepaired back door. "It's now!" Zong Han growled, his mind touched the back door and successfully invaded the core point. No data flowed into his brain, and the entire plan of the spirit melting furnace was now in front of him. The AI control system has been completed by 90%, and only one last step is left to put the entire city's brain network into control. And those digital souls trapped in the ground are the energy sources of this system. Go to death. Zong Han gritted his teeth, quickly activated the self-edited virus code, and tried to destroy the control system. But at the same time, the defense system launched a final counterattack, and a destructive data thrust his mind, as if he wanted to tear his soul apart. In fact, Zong Han suddenly let out a scream, holding his head with both hands, and his whole person fell to the ground, with blood from his nose and the blood in the corners of his eyes flowing down together. Xiao Han's heart tightened, he slapped his face suddenly, shouting, "Zong Han! Wake up! Don't open it!" In the dead, Zong Han's consciousness was almost swallowed up, but the brilliance suddenly appeared in his brain, and the trust and protection of Xiao Han along the way. He gritted his teeth and let out a low growl, "I won't fall down." At that moment, his willpower broke through the limit, and he kept the data slamming, injecting the virus code into the control system. The black ball emitted a harsh sound of sorrow, and the chains broke, and countless light points rushed out, like a liberated soul, emitting gratitude in the ground. In reality, the door that controlled the hall suddenly unfolded, and the central tower's warning sounded over the sky, and it was obvious that the system collapsed and developed the highest level of emergency. Xiao Han quickly helped Zong Han up and rushed into the hall. Inside is a huge data center, countless servers emit cold blue light, and a red warning of system error is displayed on the screen of the central console. "Success," Zong Han said weakly, almost unable to hear the sound. He leaned against Xiao Han's shoulder, his mind was blurred, but a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. However, the time for the celebration has not arrived yet. The door on the other end of the hall was suddenly kicked open, and a tall figure walked in. "How you?" His game armor was filled with traces left by the battle. The particle cannon on his right arm emitted dangerous energy waves, and the red light in his eyes was flashing with ulterior motives. "You guys, dare to destroy the soul-melting furnace." Hao Yu's voice was low and mechanized, with an incomparable anger. "Today, you don't want to leave alive." Xiao Han gritted his teeth, pushed Zong Han to the side, quickly took out his electromagnetic gun and the last bullet. "Shaokai bird, protect yourself, I'll hold him." Zong Han wanted to stand up and help, but the side effects made him unable to raise his hand. He could only lean against the server, gasping, his brain was moving at a rapid speed, and tried to find a way to counterattack. Hao Yu sneered, the particle cannon was instantly charged, and a blue energy beam rushed to Xiao Han. Xiao Han quickly turned over and hid behind a row of servers, but the energy beam directly shattered half of the server. The aftermath of the explosion made her shoulders slam and blood flowed down her arms. "It's useless, Xiao Han," Hao Yu approached, and the mechanical fist buzzed a low buzz. "You have destroyed the soul melt, but the power of the Enterprise is not what you can imagine. Make a dream." Xiao Han gritted his teeth and quickly blew out the bullet. The electromagnetic wave exploded, and Hao Yu's particle cannon lost its spirit for a short time, but his armor was almost unaffected. He rushed in a few steps and punched Xiao Han to the place where he was hiding. Seeing that Xiao Han was in danger, Zong Han bit his teeth and started the connection of the brain again, and his mind sinks to the ground. He knew that this connection might be the last, and the side effects had broken his consciousness, but he didn't choose. In the ground, he quickly locked Haoyu's data point, a red core radiating strong energy waves, surrounded by countless defense codes. Zong Han concentrated all his spirit and turned into a data flow toward the core, but the anti-code counters arrived almost instantly, as if countless sharp blades were cutting his mind. Ah! Zong Han screamed in reality, blood flowing down his nostrils and corners of his eyes, and his body twitched violently. But he gritted his teeth and squeezed his head, and there was only one thought in his brain: protect Xiao Han and destroy Haoyu. In the dead, his consciousness had a fierce exchange with Haoyu's vision of the game. Haoyu's data core emitted a cold will, as if countless sounds roared in Zong Han's brain. You are just a snail. You dare to challenge the order of the Enterprise? Go and die. Zong Han's consciousness was almost broken, but he suddenly felt the faint power of the liberated lights in the ground, as if countless souls were supporting him. He growled, burst out his final willpower, breaking through the defense and invading Haoyu's core point. Give me, collapse. Zong Han gritted his teeth and turned all his mental power into a destructive data impact, smashing it into the core. Haoyu's data point emitted a harsh sound of sorrow, which then began to disintegrate, and countless code fragments scattered. In fact, Haoyu suddenly let out a low growl, and the particle cannon and armor system lost their spirit at the same time. The red light went out from his eyes, and the whole person stopped stiffly. Xiao Han seized the opportunity, pulled out from the server, opened several shots of the electromagnetic gun, and accurately hit the link of the Haoyu armor. Haoyu let out an angry roar, but the system collapsed, which made him unable to counterattack. In the end, he was hit by an electromagnetic bomb, and fell to the ground and sparks appeared. Fuck it. Xiao Han gasped, wiped the blood from the magnitude, and turned around to Zong Han's body. She found that Zong Han had fallen to the ground, his mind was blurred, and his face was as white as a dead person. Zong Han! Wake up! Xiao Han slapped his face suddenly, and there was a panic in his voice. Don't die, your mother. Zong Han opened his eyes tightly, and a weak smile came out from the corner of his mouth. I am not dead yet, the soul melting. Has it been destroyed? Xiao Han clicks the head and quickly checks the console. The warning of the system collapses in full is displayed on the screen. The AI control plan of the soul-melting furious failed at all, and the data of the innumerable spirit was liberated from the corporate network, like an invisible light dissipating in the neon night sky of the city. It's done. Xiao Han said in a low voice, with a sob choking in his voice. We really did. But Zong Han's situation became worse and worse. The side effects of the hindrance almost broke his consciousness. The brain socket was burning as if it was about to burn, and the data wristband kept flashing with red warnings. Xiao Han gritted his teeth and quickly took out the last bottle of medicine from his backpack to try to relieve his pain, but the effect was minimal. No, you have to connect the brain to the connection. Xiao Han said in a low voice, his eyes chaotic, but if you open it, you may lose this ability and even affect your memory. Zong Han gasped and reluctantly slapped, stop it. I don't want to become a data slave. I don't want to go back to the ground. Xiao Han was silent for a moment, then clicked the head and found a tight opening line next to the console, connecting to Zong Han's brain socket. She took a deep breath and said in a low voice, Satabi, are you ready? This may hurt. Come on. Zong Han closed his eyes, his voice weak and determined. The next second, Xiao Han pressed the shut-off key, and a strong current rush passed through the socket. Zong Han let out a low growl, and then he lost consciousness. The brain was cut off vigorously, and the cold air that was shattered forever disappeared from his consciousness, and together with that ability, it was sealed in the past. A few days later, an unprecedented wave of resistance broke out in the bottom street of ZBU City. The truth of the Spirit Soul Furious plan was spread by Xiao Han through the black market network, and the company's tragedy was finally exposed, and countless people who were squeezed into data slaves took to the streets and fought fiercely with the company's thugs. Although the central tower is still in its old power, its authority has begun to move, and the city under neon lights has ignited the fire of hope for the first time. When Zong Han woke up from a coma, he found himself lying in a broken underground medical room, surrounded by Xiao Han's tired and relaxed smile. His back neck socket has been removed, his brain capacity has disappeared completely, and the torture of side effects has also dissipated, but there is an inconspicuous emptiness in his mind. "Wake up, Xiao Kai Bird." Xiao Han Hao gave him a bottle of electrolytic beverages, with a few slight choruses in his language. "Congratulations, you've transformed from a technical slave into a liberator. People on the street are telling your story, saying you're a hero who can talk to the earthly soul." Zong Han smiled bitterly, took the drink, and said in a low voice, "Hero? I just don't want to die. Those souls are really liberated?" Xiao Han pointed his head, and a gentle flashed in his eyes. "It's all free." After the melting of the spirit, the Enterprise's data network lost its core control, and the digital spirit will no longer be trapped in the dead. My person can finally rest in peace." Zong Han was silent for a moment, and then asked, "What are you planning to fuck next?" Xiao Han smiled and said with a smile, Stay at the bottom and help those who resist to find out the information, so that you can see if this city can be better." "What about you? Without brain power, are you planning to return to your old career as a programmer?" Zong Han shook his head and looked at the neon lights outside the window. "No, I want to do something else. Maybe, help rebuild this place so that it will no longer be a prison for enterprises." Xiao Han raised his eyebrows and patted his shoulder. "It's good, Xiao Kai Bird, I finally have some success. Let's go together. We may be able to do something big if we match this article." Zong Han smiled and said nothing, just stared at the night outside the window. He knew that he was no longer the bottom-level programmer who was only slaughtered for survival. Although he had lost his brain ability, he found himself in this battle and won freedom for countless souls. As the side effects are at the edge, he chose to connect the cleavage with the ground, and preserved his true nature as a human being. As the night wind blows, the neon lights in the city of Xianbo remain the same, but this time, Zong Han's eyes have a warm light. He and Xiao Han stood up shoulder to face the unknown future, carrying hope and rescue. Terms, about 3,750 words.